The tower had stood on the Kansas plains for 43 years, a monument to a war that had ended before most of the territory's current residents were born. It was a strange thing, rising from the flat emptiness like a stone finger pointing at the sky, built by soldiers who had long since returned east, abandoned by everyone who had ever claimed it. When Eleanor Graves received word that her great-uncle had left it to her, she had to look at a map to find where it was. The lawyer's letter had called it a structure of some historical interest. The town called it a white elephant. Eleanor called it hers. She arrived on a morning when the sky was so wide it seemed to swallow the world, the prairie stretching in every direction until it blurred into the horizon. The tower stood at the edge of a small settlement called Harker's Ford, a town that had never quite grown into the promise its founders had imagined. It was not the grand structure she had pictured from her great-uncle's description. It was a cylinder of weathered stone, its top crumbling, its windows dark, a ladder of iron bolts leading to a door that hung open like a mouth waiting to speak. But it was hers, the first thing in her life that was entirely, unquestionably hers. The town watched her arrival with the cautious curiosity of people who had learned to expect disappointment. She was a woman alone, a widow, a stranger from the east who had come to claim something no one else wanted. The mercantile owner sold her supplies with a pitying smile. The blacksmith offered to buy the stone for a price that would barely cover her train fare home. The women at the boarding house whispered behind their hands, wondering how long she would last before the loneliness and the wind and the emptiness drove her back to wherever she had come from. Eleanor heard them all, smiled at them all, and said nothing. The first weeks were harder than she had imagined. The tower had been empty for decades, its interior a chaos of fallen stone, bird nests, and the bones of small animals that had found their way in and never found their way out. She cleared the debris by hand, her arms aching, her hands blistering, her back screaming with the effort of hauling stone after stone out into the sunlight. She patched the roof with timber she bought on credit, repaired the door with iron hinges she traded for her mother's brooch, built a hearth in the center of the main room where she could cook and sleep and live. And slowly, stone by stone, she began to make the tower a home. He appeared on a day when the wind was so fierce it seemed to flatten the prairie against the earth. A rider on a dun horse, his hat pulled low, his coat whipping around him like a second skin. He pulled up at the base of the tower, looking up at the structure with an expression she could not read. And when he saw her standing in the doorway, he touched his hat and introduced himself. Thomas Wade. He had a claim a few miles north, a homestead he was trying to build from nothing. He had heard someone was living in the old tower, and he had come to see if she needed help. She did not need help, she told him. She had been managing well enough on her own. But he stayed anyway, helping her carry water from the well, showing her where to find the best firewood, teaching her how to read the sky for weather. He was quiet, this man, his face weathered by years on the plains, his hands calloused and sure. He did not ask why she had come, did not tell her she was foolish for staying, did not look at the tower with the pity she had come to expect from everyone else. He looked at it the way she did not as a ruin, but as a beginning. The weeks passed, and Thomas became a constant presence in her life. He came twice a week, then 3 times, then almost every day. He helped her raise a garden at the base of the tower, a patch of green against the endless brown of the prairie. He taught her to shoot, to ride, to track the storms that built on the horizon like mountains of cloud and fury. And at night, when the wind howled around the tower and the stars filled the sky with impossible light, they sat together on the small platform she had built at the top, looking out at a world that seemed to belong only to them. The tower, she discovered, was not just a tower. Her great-uncle had been a man of strange enthusiasms, a student of weather and wind and the patterns of the sky. In a chest she found at the top of the tower, buried under years of dust and bird droppings, she discovered his journals, dozens of them, filled with careful observations, charts of storms, diagrams of wind patterns, theories about the way the planes shaped the weather that came across them. He had believed, her great-uncle, that the tower was not a monument to war. It was an observatory, a place for watching the sky, a key to understanding something no one else had bothered to understand. She read his journals by lantern light, night after night, while the wind sang through the cracks in the stone and the prairie stretched dark and endless beyond her windows. He had been a lonely man, her great-uncle, a man who had seen things in the sky that no one else believed. He had written of storms that moved in patterns, of winds that followed laws no one had bothered to learn, of the way the tower stood at the center of something, a convergence, he called it, a place where the weather of the plains came together like rivers meeting at a sea. She did not understand all of it, not yet, but she understood that the tower was not worthless. It was waiting. Thomas found her on the platform one evening, her great-uncle's journal open in her lap, her face turned toward the horizon where clouds were beginning to build. She told him about the journals, about her great-uncle's theories, about the patterns she was beginning to see in the way the wind moved across the prairie. He listened, as he always listened, his face quiet, his attention complete. And when she finished, he looked out at the clouds and said something that made her heart stop. "There's a pattern," he said. "I've seen it too. The storms come here. They always come here. And the tower," he looked up at the stone walls around them. "The tower is still standing. After everything, it's still standing." That was the summer the storms began to change. They had always come. The great rolling thunderstorms that built on the western horizon and swept across the plains like armies on the march. But this summer, they were worse, stronger, more violent. Harker's Ford had never been a prosperous town, but it had always been a safe one, protected by the lay of the land, by the river that cut through the valley, by the luck that had kept the worst of the weather to the north and south. That luck, Eleanor began to understand, was running out. And the tower, the useless tower everyone had mocked, was the only thing on the plains tall enough to see what was coming. She climbed the tower every day that summer, watching the horizon, tracking the storms with the skill she was learning from her great-uncle's journals. She could read the clouds now, could see the difference between a storm that would pass and a storm that would destroy. She charted the wind patterns, measured the pressure, recorded the temperature in a notebook that filled faster than any of her great-uncles had. Thomas climbed with her when he could, his presence a steady comfort at her side. But she was the one who watched, the one who learned, the one who began to understand what her great-uncle had been trying to tell the world. The storm came on a night when the moon was full, and the air was so still it seemed the whole world was holding its breath. Eleanor was on the platform, as she was every night, her eyes on the western horizon where a darkness was building that was not the darkness of night. She saw it first, the way the clouds were moving, the way the wind was shifting, the way the pressure in her ears was dropping like a stone, and she knew. This was not a storm that would pass. This was the storm her great-uncle had written about, the storm that came once in a generation, the storm that would swallow everything in its path. She ran down the tower stairs, her boots echoing on the stone, her heart pounding in her chest. Thomas was there, at the base, his horse saddled, his face grim. He had seen it too. Together, they rode for Harker's Ford, the wind already rising, the first drops of rain beginning to fall. They roused the town from its sleep, pounding on doors, shouting warnings, herding people toward the tower, toward the only structure on the plains strong enough to withstand what was coming. Some came willingly. Others laughed, called her crazy, went back to their beds. She did not wait for them. She could not save everyone, but she could try. The tower filled with frightened people, their faces pale in the lantern light, their voices rising in fear as the wind began to howl. Eleanor moved among them, calm, steady, her great-uncle's voice in her ears, his journals in her hands. She knew this tower. She knew its strength, its history, its secrets. She had repaired its walls, sealed its windows, shored up its roof. It had stood for 43 years against everything the plains could throw at it. It would stand tonight. She climbed to the platform as the storm broke, as the rain turned to hail, as the wind became a living thing that screamed against the stone. Thomas was with her, his hand in hers, his face turned toward the darkness that was swallowing the world. What happened that night became legend in Harker's Ford. The storm raged for hours, lightning splitting the sky, wind tearing at the tower walls, rain falling in sheets so thick it was like drowning in the air. But the tower stood. It had always stood. And Eleanor, standing on the platform with her great-uncle's journal pressed against her chest, watched the storm move across the plains with a clarity she had never imagined. She saw the patterns he had written about, the way the winds converged, the way the tower sat at the center of something that was not chance but design. She understood, in that moment, why her great-uncle had built it. Not for war, not for defense. For this, for watching, for knowing, for being the one place on the plains where you could see the storm coming and survive. When dawn broke, the storm was gone, leaving behind a world washed clean, the air so clear she could see for miles in every direction. Harker's Ford was gone. The buildings she had ridden through the night before were flattened, scattered, nothing but timber and dust. But the tower stood, and the people inside the tower stood with it. They came out into the morning light, blinking, weeping, laughing, holding each other as they looked at the destruction that had passed them by. And they looked at Eleanor, at the woman they had mocked, the woman who had tried to warn them, the woman whose tower had saved them all. The town rebuilt, but it rebuilt differently. Harker's Ford had learned something about the plains that night, about the storms that came from the west, about the patterns that could be read and understood. They built a new town, stronger, smarter, a place where Eleanor told them to place it, built with the knowledge her great-uncle had left behind. And at the center of it all, the tower stood, no longer a ruin, no longer a joke. It was a beacon now, a watchtower, a place where the weather was watched and the storms were tracked and the people of the plains learned to survive. Eleanor was its keeper. And Thomas, the quiet homesteader who had seen something in her that no one else had seen, was her partner in everything. The years passed, and Eleanor Graves became something she had never imagined she would be. A scientist, some called her. A weather woman, the town said. The woman who could read the sky. Her great-uncle's journals were published, his theories proven, his lonely work finally recognized. But Eleanor did not care about any of that. She cared about the tower, about the town she had helped rebuild, about the man who climbed the platform with her every night to watch the sun set over the plains. They had built a life together, she and Thomas, a life she had never thought she would have. A life that had grown from the ruins of a tower everyone else had called worthless. On the evening of their 10th anniversary, Thomas found Eleanor on the platform. As he always found her face turned toward the horizon, her hand resting on the stone wall that had become as familiar to her as her own skin. The sun was setting, painting the plains in shades of gold and rose, the sky so wide it seemed to hold the whole world. He came to stand beside her, and she leaned into him, her head against his shoulder, her hand finding his. "Do you remember," she said, "when everyone thought I was crazy to come here?" He smiled, his arm tightening around her. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met." She looked up at him, at the man who had seen her when she was nothing, who had helped her build something from nothing, who had loved her when she was too stubborn to love herself. "It was never the tower," she said quietly. "It was always the people who believed in it." They stood together in the fading light, looking out at the town they had helped build, at the plains that stretched to the horizon, at the sky that held 1,000 storms they would face together. And in the tower that had saved them all, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely place watched the stars appear, one by one, over the home they had made.